Hi there, Coach Sage of SageRunning.com here with a training talk on what to expect in your first marathon. Maybe you're it's going to be your debut at 26.2 miles or 42 kilometers, and hopefully, these are some pointers that could help make that experience a real positive experience. It's a great accomplishment to run that far and to compete in a race. And basically, my recommendations, prerequisites, would be to check out our website, sagerunning.com, for a free aerobic base building plan, and make sure that you've trained for this race. A lot of people pour their heart and soul into running a marathon, and the more you train and the more consistent, more time you give yourself to get into running long distances, the better experience is probably going to be, and the more likely that you're going to be able to finish strong without any major meltdowns or injuries or things like that. So it's about consistency in the months leading into the race, as well as just being smart with your training. And our free aerobic base building plan, I'll link to it at the end on our website. You can check it out. If you aren't following that, hopefully you're following some sort of plan. Hopefully you've been running at least 3 times per week. Generally, the more the better, but you do have to be careful with increasing your mileage, and there's a whole playlist on my channel about some more sophisticated training plans and things like that. But that's kind of a prerequisite, as well as racing a half marathon. Hopefully you've raced some half marathons to kind of get a feel for the 13.1 mile distance and what kind of pace you could run for a half marathon, because going into the marathon, you're going to want to have some sort of rough time goal to know how long you're going to be out there. And again, it depends on the weather and the hills of the course, but knowing how long it takes you to do a half, let's say it takes you 2 hours to do a half marathon, well, you're going to want to double that, and then probably add at least 10 or 20 minutes, if not more, maybe even a half hour in that time range. Whereas when you get really well trained and you get faster and more experience, you could double your half marathon time and maybe only add 5 or 10 minutes to your half marathon time. But that's usually for more advanced runners in a slightly faster time range. So it does kind of depend on your half marathon experience, and know that the marathon is a different ball game. It's a totally different race. It's the first race, basically anything over 20 miles or 32 kilometers is when you start getting into a zone where things feel different. Distance running's hard. It's hard to run a mile. It's hard to run an 800 meter all out. It's hard to run a marathon all out, and the pain manifests itself in different ways, the pain and fatigue. And the main thing that my first tip, and we'll go through this kind of in chronological order, is going into race day, race weekend, make sure you don't eat anything weird, and we'll have a whole talk on what you should eat before a race. But generally, for most people, don't deviate too much from what you've been eating and training, and don't try anything crazy. It is good to hydrate with some electrolyte fluid, not just plain water. A lot of people, sometimes they drink gallons of plain water and they'll overhydrate themselves, and it's actually a very dangerous situation if you dilute your blood too much with just plain water. So make sure you have some sodium and potassium in there, as well as eat normal. I always like to eat dinner really early the night before race, because usually they start in the morning, and usually something like pasta or rice, carbohydrate sourced from whole grains or whole fruits, vegetables, things like that, is usually what I'm used to. So that's usually something you recommend. I'll do a video on nutrition and carb loading and things like that in a separate talk. But yeah, going into the race, you want to make sure you wake up race morning, plenty of time before the race. You usually like to wake up at least 3 hours before the start of the race. Again, it might depend on your transportation, things like that. Make sure I could have my coffee and go to the bathroom several times before I even leave where I'm staying, where I slept. Because when you get to the starting line, you will probably find, and this is common in most big marathons, big city marathons. Again, I've run Boston, New York, Chicago, all sorts of marathons like that. There's not enough porta potties at the starting line area for how many people there are and how many very hydrated people there are, especially if you're in a downtown area. Sometimes it might be awkward, but you have to wait in that porta potty line for a long time. Be prepared for that. Also be prepared with like a garbage bag or something you could throw away, an old Holy sweatshirt or something in case it's cold, something you could always shed off and put onto the side, or sometimes they have donation for homeless people as well. Extra layers, garbage bag you just throw away, so there's that, in case it's raining or it's cold at starting line, because you'll probably be standing around near the starting area for at least an hour or two, and it could be miserable weather. So be prepared with that. Hat and gloves are always good too, because you could always throw those away as you run, or tuck them in your pockets or something like that. Now, the start of the race, you want to have a rough time goal so you know how to pace yourself, right? So if you're you're going for a 4-hour marathon, you're going just to finish. Your first goal in your first debut marathon should be to try to finish strong and have a positive experience, not to go after any crazy time goal. You could if you want, if you've been training at a high level and it's indicative of that, or you're super talented. But for most people, it's about surviving the distance and making it to that finish line in one piece. And the number one thing you're going to do is start off at a reasonable, slow pace, a steady pace that you will be able to hopefully sustain, especially in the last 10 miles or the last 6 miles when it gets really hard. And so it's probably going to feel really easy at the start, and you'll be crowded with a lot of people depending on the size of the race, but stick to your plan. Don't get too excited with adrenaline. Yeah, most people are going to crash and burn or hit the wall in the last 10K or the last 6 miles of the race. It always happens around mile 18 to 20. So have that mindset of try to break the race down into smaller components and pace yourself very conservatively in the first 10 miles, in the first half, because the slowdown will happen probably in the second half, and you just don't want it to be too drastic, right? You don't want to be totally zigzagging all over the course, having to stop and walk, or stop at the aid stations for a really long period of time and feel just miserable because you went out at your 10K pace or your half marathon PR pace. And then, some people get really fit doing marathon training and they're able to actually get a personal best in the first half marathon of their marathon, and that's a real good sign. But if you've been running a lot of half marathons and you're pretty experienced, you probably don't want to go out at your half marathon PR pace. You want to go out quite a bit slower, because you could always speed up at the end. And if you're speeding up in the last 6 miles or 10K of the race, you will be blowing by a bunch of people and you'll be exhilarating. You'll be feeling relatively good at the finish line. So that's the goal. Now, the other thing with hitting the wall is that depending on weather conditions as well as the nature of the course, let's say it's not too extreme hilly of a course and it's not too extreme weather conditions, you need to still hydrate with fluid, and you still need to take in calories during the run if you want to reach your potential. Some people will be like, oh no, I could run all on my fat stores, and they're going at a submaximal effort. You could survive probably the 26.2 miles, but at a much slower rate. But if you're working hard, if you're breathing pretty hard, you're going to run out of glycogen or your carbohydrate stores probably around 20 miles, and that's when people hit the wall, so to speak. You'll also be experiencing some muscle fatigue, very extreme muscle soreness, stiff legs, things like that. The legs will bonk first, and then your mind starts to go, because the brain actually needs a lot of carbohydrates to kind of fuel its thought processes and coordination and things like that. So what I do is best is to carry some energy packets with you. I use my Spring Energy. These are a gel-like consistency. This is actually a natural fruit source with basmati rice and fruit, and you could enter SAGE, the code SAGE, for a 10% discount at myspringenergy.com. But I'd take 3 or 4 of those at least during a marathon, and it would be like once at 5 miles, once at 10 miles, once at 15 miles, once at 20 miles, and then I might have another one just in case at mile 23 or so to get me to that finish. So something like that. So, a lot of courses, depending on the aid stations, they'll have aid stations set up at maybe every 5K or every 3 miles in the big city marathon, but they don't always have a bunch of calories like these My Spring Energy. So if you like a personal brand, or you've been testing something out on a long run, you want to be able to carry these with you. Now, it's good if you could stuff these in your shorts or pants pockets. It's good if you carry you could use like a Nathan belt, or even some people might even carry a small handheld with a pocket that you could put these types of calories in. But it's always good to have some on hand, and again, if you could fit them in, they're pretty light to carry. It's going to be worth it to have that fuel. Otherwise, you're going to be having to rely on the aid stations on the course. Now, the aid stations usually in big city marathons will have a combination where they'll have a big table with a bunch of cups set up, maybe disposable cups, maybe it'll be a couples race, but the big city marathons have this, and usually one table is devoted to just water, and one table is devoted to some sort of electrolyte drink or sports drink, depending on who sponsors the race. And then certain aid stations, maybe in the second half of the race, at around mile 15 or mile 20, might have extra calories, extra snacks, or gel things like that you could grab, but I wouldn't rely on those. I wouldn't rely on those. It might be a brand you don't like, so I would carry my own calories, but I do use the aid stations, and again, they wouldn't be big cups like this, yay Starbucks, but basically these will be sitting on a table, and you'll have to see if you want water or some sort of electrolyte or sports drink fluid, and sometimes volunteers will be handing them out, and you grab it as you go along, but set it on the table. The best strategy to do is to come in, slow down, and pinch the top of the cup. Actually just pinch it like this. It creates a spout, and you're able to carry it and still walk through the aid station, or even keep a running pace through the aid station, and sip the fluid out of the drink without it having to slosh in your face. Most people grab it like a regular cup, half the liquid spills out, and then they pour it all over their face. You might want to pour some on your head if it's really hot and it's water, but if you want to actually drink some, you pinch it from the top coming in, or you grab it from the volunteer, pinch it, then you sip out of it with the spout. That's the strategy that you want to use for cups in a race. You get in the most fluid. And again, you probably do want to be taking in at least a cup, if not 2 cups per hour. If it's hot, you're going to want to get in a lot of electrolytes as well, sodium and potassium in the sports drink. Or again, this is a sponsor plug because I'm sponsored by them, but My Spring Energy has a drink called Electro Ride. It's actually a liquid, it's almost like a salty apple juice flavor. It has 100 calories per pack, but it has sodium and potassium. It's got the nice salt in it, potassium. It's a good mix of electrolytes, and you're gonna get dehydrated. If you're working hard and it's not super cold, you'll probably get dehydrated. So you wanna take enough in, but you don't wanna take so much in that you get nausea and stomach distress. So it is kind of a fine line there. But if you slow down at the aid stations, take your time, be sure to get in some calories and some fluids, you should be good to go. So you're pacing yourself well, you're doing that kind of nutrition strategy. Mentally, you break it down and you say that the 20-mile mark is really the halfway point in the race, because everything that happens before 20 miles, if you're ahead of pace in the first 20 miles, you could lose all of that in the last 6 miles or the last 10K. So really, have the mindset, break the race down 1 mile at a time or 1 kilometer at a time, but think that the 20-mile mark, 32-kilometer point, is really the halfway of the race, and then that last 10K, that last 6.2 miles is really everything in terms of your time goal, and that's where most people really struggle. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy, but nothing worth accomplishing, nothing that's really satisfying to accomplish in life is easy, right? The struggle is part of the joy of crossing that finish line, and so I really think if you follow these methods, you're going to improve your chances of succeeding. And a lot of people, they really do struggle in their first marathon. It's a big learning experience, and that's all part of the process. That's part of the process of becoming a well-rounded distance runner, is experiencing different race distances and conquering such a long distance, especially on the roads. It's a really tough event, but something that we love, something that's painful, but something that you really want to pat yourself on the back for, and an amazing community to be a part of. So whether your goal is to just finish one marathon, finish your first marathon and then be done, or to keep going and see how fast you could go, maybe even try to qualify for the Boston Marathon, something like that. I think it's a great goal, great lifestyle, something that you could really be healthy in, especially with your training. So enjoy the training process leading up to it, and then try to enjoy the race and definitely celebrate afterwards. But those are my tips on marathon training. Again, you can check out our free aerobic base building plan, as well as other running blog tips, posts, blog podcasts on our website, sagerunning.com. We sell training plans there, as well as like us on Facebook. We got a Facebook page, Sage Running. Thanks so much, guys. Please subscribe if you like these types of videos. Well, give them a thumbs up. Again, check out the playlist, and definitely stay tuned for more Sage Running videos.